Lovely day, all right.
Ain't you glad I called you out?
Hey, it's Eric back on the bike. You know, runners joke about an imaginary disease called randonnesia, which is what happens when you do a really long brevet. And for a while afterwards, you forget about all the pain and the suffering. It's what really makes it possible to go do something like PBP more than once, because those memories never quite come back. The good ones do, though. And I thought I'd share with you some of my memories from prior PBPs. And we'll start with this edition of PBP Tips with just some quick memories from my first edition, which was back in 2007. In 2007, as many of you may know, is notorious for the atrocious weather. It was rainy and wet for pretty much the entire ride. You know, if we weren't getting rained on, the roads were wet, and basically we stayed wet for like 3 days. 2007 for me, obviously, was my first big brevet. I had never done a 1200 before. And I'd only ever done one 600, which was the qualifier I did to get to PBP that year. So I'd done that distance, never done a 12, and my friends and I decided to set out and do PBP on fixed gear bicycles. There was a reason for that. We were all riding them pretty heavily at the time. I'd gotten into fixed gear riding back in about 2005. And almost immediately applied that to long distance cycling, centuries and double centuries. So when the idea came up to do PBP in 07, it just seemed natural to say, well, let's do that on fixed gears. So in 06, a number of us had done a very long ride across country. I rode from California to Kansas on a fixed gear bike as part of a ride called the Big Fix, which was a cross-country ride all on fixed gear bikes. So I had that in my legs, all my other base miles, and then just kept on riding on fixed gears because it was fun. So 3 of us, my friend Peter and another rider called Doc, showed up in Paris with our fixed gear bikes and set out on the ride. In the end, only Peter and I finished. Our other friend made it about as far as Teteniak, and then he had to bag the ride. He just wasn't feeling well. So Peter and I continued on. We eventually split up. We had planned to ride the whole thing together, but he was stronger than I was, so he went out ahead and finished. So some of my memories from that ride, other than just how atrociously wet it was, one thing was we got very little sleep. We were on fixed gear bikes, so we were going generally a little slower than the regular bikes. Simply can't coast downhill as fast on a fixed gear. It's too hard on your legs. So we were running up against controlled closing times pretty much the entire ride. Now we learned later that they had extended the times by a couple of hours because so many people were going so slow on that ride. But we didn't know it then, so we were struggling to stay ahead of the controls. I recall the first night we did the 84-hour start. So the first night we were approaching Ludiac, not quite there yet, and ducked into a bar that had put a sign up in French, about here's a place you can sleep at night where it's dry with your bike. So my first real rest of PBP that year was crashed under the table at a French bar somewhere in the countryside outside Ludiac. So that brief rest kind of set the stage for the rest of the ride. And all total, I recall getting about 5 hours of sleep. on the entire ride. I finished that ride just utterly exhausted. I remember crossing the finish line, going into the gymnasium at the end, getting my brevet card stamped, and then just kind of stumbling or weaving over to the side of the inside wall of the building and just laying down. I just had absolutely no energy left. I had a few gel packs and I tried to finish those off as best I could. I gave my little drink ticket to someone who came up, asked if they could help, and they went and got me something to drink, and I just laid there for about a half an hour. I just couldn't even get up. I was just utterly exhausted. In fact, about 20 or so kilometers from the finish, I just had to get off the bike, and I found a place to lay on the side of the road, and I was laying there on my back next to my bike, just kind of looking up, and I recall the motorcycle official came up and asked me in French, "Are you finished?" He says, "C'est fini?" And I said, no, I'm gonna go. And I got back on the bike and kept on going. And around that time, I ran into a friend of mine named Mark Gunther, and I told him, "Mark, I gotta stay awake. I'm about to fall asleep on the bike. Just talk to me." And Mark, God bless him, talked to me non-stop all the way back into the finish, and kept my mind engaged enough to keep me from just, completely losing it on the bike. I was really, really mentally tired at that point, but I did finish. A few other memories from that ride. Actually, one before the ride started. I was in the lobby of the hotel in Saint-Quentin, and a good friend of mine, Amy Rafferty, who's finished PBP many times, knew me, knew I was there on a fixed gear, and she just looked at me one afternoon and said, "You're crazy, don't you?" And I kind of nodded. And as it turned out, of course, she was right. It is crazy to do that ride on a fixed gear. Having done it, I'm glad I did. Never do it again on a fixed gear. The other times I've done it on regular bikes were so much more fun. I had reserved a hotel room in Ludiac. I wanted to go there and get cleaned up and maybe take a nap. So we got to Ludiac, found our drop bag, and asked the person who was watching those, where the hotel was. He gave us directions to it, but he said it was about 1 kilometer away. And at that point, it was late at night, it was cold, it was wet, I was tired, didn't have much time, and I said, no way, I'm not going to do that. So I took a shower at Ludiac, and I don't recall sleeping there. Maybe I slept there for an hour, can't remember, and got back on the bike. I never saw that hotel, so I never got to use that hotel room at all. And another memory from that ride, again getting back to the fact that we were just wet for so long, was that I think most of us, certainly I did, ended up smelling just terrible. To the point where at some of the later controls, it was actually hard to eat because of all the odors wafting up from down below. It was just awful. I was barely able to wash my clothes before I left France, and I think I ended up throwing away some stuff when I got back to the States. I just could not get the smell out. It was just terrible. So that is one thing you probably don't expect about PBP. Another really important lesson I learned in 2007 was about my hands. So I've done another PBP tips already on the subject of hands and paying attention to hand position and preventing problems there, because I really had some in 2007. It was the longest ride that I had ever done. As I said, I'd only ever done a 600K before, and it just really started adding up. By the last day, I was having to pull over and raise the stem up on my handlebars to try and take some weight off my hands and arms because I was really having trouble with losing feeling in my hands, losing feeling in kind of my lower arms. It was really concerning, and in fact I got back and it took really several months for my hands to get back to feeling more or less normal, where they weren't numb and where I had the strength back in them that I did before. And ever since then, I've been more susceptible to that kind of problem. So it's something I pay a lot of attention to when I ride nowadays. And I definitely recommend you check out my PBP Tips episode on hands for a little more thinking about that topic. At the end of the day, 2007 was an extremely difficult event. Probably the hardest thing I've ever done on a bicycle. Certainly the hardest thing I ever hoped to do on a bicycle. That was 12 years ago, and I don't really feel the need nowadays to kind of prove what a tough guy I am. Done that before. I will always be able to say that I did peribreast on a fixed gear, which is not something that many people can say, but I would never do it again. Hope you enjoyed these memories of mine from '07. I'll come back in future editions with memories from 11 and 15. There are also more PBP Tips episodes on some additional things to think about as you prepare for your own event this year. And again, if you like these, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. You'll learn about all my videos when they're posted. If you like this, please hit the like button, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.